so they whoever detonates a nuclear missile bomb up in the atmosphere about 300 miles up, the gamma burst comes down that's carrying all this energy, which then hits our electrical grid. What and doing research for our show and reading a bunch of stuff that you put out in the past, can you explain the EMP waveform that happens? Because there's different aspects to how that wave hits us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, right. So the bomb occurs, it generates these gamma rays, they ionize the atoms in the air, that causes electron flow around our magnetic field lines. And at the end of the day, you've got a bunch of currents flowing at the earth. And there's usually, people categorize it by three different sequential events, E1, E2, E3, what people call them. And the first one is what most people think of when they think of an EMP. It's this very, very fast broadband burst of energy, maybe 20 nanoseconds wide. So extremely thin in time, which makes it broad in frequency. And it's very high up. That's the 50,000 volt per meter kind of energy. So lots of voltage, very short time. And those are the bad things. If you had lots of voltage for a long time, it might not couple as well, but very brief time couples into everything. And so it gets in, it causes a lot of instantaneous damage. And then after that is an E2, which is very similar to like a lightning-induced kind of electromagnetic event. By itself, it actually might not be that damaging, but the problem is you just had E1 occur, and so it's already maybe taken out some of the surge protection and other things that you were counting on. So then E2 comes in, it causes some additional damage, and it may be hundreds of microseconds long, let's say. And then slowly over time, this E3 develops, which I like to compare that to like an ocean coming up. It's like the wave of energy is just slowly growing, like the tide coming in. There's nothing you're going to do to stop it. That energy is cupping into these very long conductors, power grid conductors, right? The buried long conductors or overhead long conductors. And you just swell up this energy and causes current to flow in these very large systems, not in your car, not in a small airplane, but in very large scale systems, miles and miles and miles long. And that energy is this electricity that just sort of couples into all of the grid and all of the systems around. And it may, in fact, be the most damaging of all of them. Everybody's worried about E1 because it's going to zap their car or it's going to blow their computer out. But the E3 is this unstoppable flowing energy that's going to take out all the transformers on the grid. And that will be the destructive element. All right. That will be what gets us all. It's not going to be that our car goes out, which is terrible. But once all the electricity is taken out and they can't bring it back up for 6 months, that would be a really big problem. So it's that E3 event, that swelling of energy at the end, that is, I think, very dangerous as well. So anyway, E1, E2, E3, all of them happen from an EMP. We've known about it for some time. It's a little different, by the way, than a solar event, a solar CME. We always hear of solar CMEs. And sometimes they call those EMPs, which I wish they would not. It's coronal mass ejection, big plasma of energy, which is just a charged gas comes over the Earth, causes a very similar phenomena to the E3, not to E1 and E2, just to E3. And so it has a very similar effect where it swells energy onto these long conductors. That's what a CME can do. And it can also take out our power grid. It won't hurt my car, but it, by golly, can sure take out the power grid. So both an EMP and a CME are extremely dangerous to our modern way of living, and mostly because of the susceptibility of our grids.
Right. And it's, you mentioned long conductors. So long conductors are power lines and everything that sort of feeds our grid, right? Where that our electronics, if we're plugged in at home, our electronics are attached to, but separate from that, our vehicle, our phone and stuff, it's a lot less likely to get hit with, because there's small conductors
and we're only talking about the E3 or the CME, but those only couple into things that are miles long. So your car's not going to see any E3 energy or any CME energy affect it. But anything with mile long conductors is going to get that energy on it. Now, E1 and E2, they can get into your car, they can get into your phone or whatever, but just the E3 and CME, those are really just very, very, very long conductors.
I think that's good that you distinguish between that and the CME, but it still doesn't really matter if your car is running, if our grid goes down because of a massive, 1859. What are your thoughts on that? The 1859 Carrington event, if that was replicated today, if we, because I know we're moving in 2025, July of 2025 is supposed to be the height of this solar cycle. Solar maximum, I guess, is, what would that do to our grid today if that were to happen?
Yeah, that's the big fear, right? So I always tell people, an EMP is a maybe because maybe nobody ever detonates a nuclear warhead and then we don't have an EMP, right? A CME is a certainty. We live on the planet Earth and there's a thing called the sun there, and it's going to throw a big plasma at us and we're going to have that effect, period. It's just a question of does it happen tomorrow or does it happen in 50 years, right?
Right.
And it could be related to the solar cycle, or it might not be. It might happen at a solar minimum when you never expected it to happen. The sun is extremely complicated. And so it's going to happen. And what would happen if a big Carrington style event hit the Earth? Well, we'd find out. But my guess is it would destroy lots and lots of things related to the grid. And that would disrupt life as we know it for a while. There's a lot of predictions about how quickly we would get back up and going. I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody knows the answer, but I think it's definitely worth being concerned over.
Yeah, you're right. And that was the one thing that's always struck me about it. We just don't know, right? We
Right.
just don't know about that. If a CME were to hit the Earth, is the side of the Earth that's facing away from the sun when it hits, or that's on the other side of where the
Are they
CME
safe?
hits? Are
Right.
they safe?
Maybe, but probably not.
Okay.
So there's a few interesting things about like CMEs. I'm not a sun expert, but I did have the
Sure.
privilege of interviewing one day, and I asked him some of these basic questions. First thing is to know is we know when CMEs are coming. They don't travel at the speed of light. Unlike a solar flare, CMEs are like this big flowing thing and we can see them. They go, our satellites go, hey, there's a big CME coming your way. And so we have 2 or 3 day notice, right? So you would think in theory we could just lock it down, baby, and we'd be okay. But I asked him about that. I said, well, if we know it's coming, why can't we just shut everything down and just weather this event out? And he said, there's 2 reasons. One is you don't know what its effect is going to be on the Earth. We just don't have the ability to predict it. And you won't know until it's already getting you what the effect is going to be. He said, even an hour before, you won't know. So you have to assume the worst, right? If that's the case. And he said, if we did that, then you'd shut things down all the time when big CMEs happen for no reason. And you can imagine that's going to cause chaos. And oh, by the way, it probably wouldn't make any difference. And I'm like, what? If we shut down the grid, it won't matter? He said, no, it probably wouldn't make any difference anyway, because all that energy is still going to get in those conductors and still going to force its way through these transformers and it's still going to cause all kinds of heating and thermal damage and electrical damage. So he said, it probably wouldn't make any difference anyway. So I'm like, oh, that's not good. So you have to have special protection, special hardening things have put in already to do these massive disconnects and things that shunt away the energy and that kind of thing that we just don't have. And so his conclusion was it probably wouldn't help you anyway to shut it down, and you don't know how bad it's going to be. Now, would it affect the other side of the Earth? Well, I think it depends on how bad the CME is, and that's just based on data, because we've had CMEs that take out like the northern part of the US up into Canada for a while, and it didn't reach around the Earth. But if you get a big Carrington style event, I think that energy essentially would couple. And remember, CME is not over like in 30 minutes or anything. It may last for quite a while. You're going to couple energy into quite a bit of the planet, I think. Knowing our luck, we'll be facing right at the sun.
Yeah, that's it. And I guess I didn't even think about how long those events go on for.
Yeah.
What do you think like a time frame of a CME, like how long would that maybe last for, do you think?
I would think at least hours, right?
Okay.
So you're going to have some hours. And it depends again on the CME, if it's a glancing blow, a direct hit, how big the plasma is, all kinds of things. But it's not like a flash and it's over, right? It's a big, gigantic plasma gas that's coming over the Earth and perturbating things, which is why it's so hard to predict what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
That, I guess if you're living if you're living in the South and you go out and you see the Northern Lights, well, you have a good idea what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.